Everything you need to know about To Kill a Mockingbird, Chapter 6. I hope you like Chapter 6, so let's talk about it. The chapter starts out the last evening of summer. Jem and Scout ask Atticus if they can go hang out with Dill at Miss Rachel's fish pool. They meet him in her yard, making small talk about the moon and how they're going to miss Dill when he leaves the next day. So Scout asks if they should keep an eye out for Mr. Avery, and then she narrates a weird story that you might miss or find hard to understand, which is how they saw Mr. Avery pee from his front porch in like this 10-foot arc into the street. This, of course, inspired a contest between Jem and Dill to try to match him, while Scout obviously couldn't participate in the contest. It's obvious something is up, because all of a sudden Dill wants to go for a walk in the direction of the Radleys, so Scout starts to argue and warn them, but Jem shuts her down that she doesn't have to go with them. He calls her Angel May, which may be confusing, but think of it as another kind of girly, goody two-shoes kind of insult, which he's really good at when it comes to Scout. So while he first says they're just walking to the corner and back, Jem expands to say that they're going to try and look in a window to see if they can see Boo. So when Scout asks why, Jem has a list of reasons why they're doing it this night. Number one, like it's dark, they wouldn't be seen, it would be easier to see in the house, and even that Atticus is going to be at home distracted by a book. It doesn't hurt that if anything happens that they'd miss school instead of missing their summer. Scout is begging, and this only gets her called a girl yet again. So of course, rather than succumb to the insult, Scout goes along. They go to the back of the Radley property and go through several obstacles. There's a barbed wire fence, there's a squeaky gate they have to spit on to make it quiet, they even have to step in chicken poop. The backyard is messy and trashy. So they go around to the side of the house where the shutter is broken and hoist Jem up, but he can only see a little light somewhere deep in the house. So they go back to the back porch, and Scout stops Dill because she's getting really nervous, but Jem goes up the steps to look in the back window. And this is when Scout notices a man's shadow in the moonlight moving across the back porch. Why, when it is so bright out with the moon that whoever it is can't see the kids, I can't tell you. But Dill then sees it, and finally Jem. The shadow pauses, then goes back across the porch and around the side of the house. As soon as it's gone, they take off through the yard and through the gate. Scout trips in the garden, and when she does, a shotgun blast goes off, and they all duck to the ground, then scramble to the barbed wire fence to get all the way out. Dill and Scout go through while Jem holds the wire, and when they are out and take off, Jem gets stuck. So Scout and Dill have to run back. They find Jem kicking his pants off the tangled barbed wire. So because of what happened, they decide to run home, but when they see all the neighbors at the Radley fence, because a gun just went off, Jem knows that they have to go down there or their absence is going to seem weird. The problem is he's not wearing any pants, just his underwear. So we should pause for a moment and talk terminology being used for different races. You've probably noticed the N-word has been dropped a couple of times. Now, Harper Lee illustrates in this book how freely this term was thrown around when the story took place, but more respectable characters in the novel do not use it. Atticus corrects Scout at one point for using it that we're going to see. We know the ugliness of the term, and we don't use it outside of the context of the novel. Some teachers and people don't even like quoting it in essays or even reading it out of the book. It is ugly. Now, the term Negro is used in the book, but understand that this term has some history to it and is no longer used, and it's not acceptable. It was the accepted terminology in favor of the word colored in the early 1900s until about the mid-1960s. So when a character uses the term Negro in the book, they aren't being racist, unlike when they use the N-word. By the 1980s, though, this term was culturally not acceptable anymore, and black was the most used term. African American started being more common as we approached the 1990s, but polls and research have shown that one of these is not really preferred more than the other at this point in our culture. So, back to the story. When the kids come up to the chatting neighbors, the talk is that Mr. Radley shot in the air due to a prowler that for some reason is assumed was black. And we don't know why this is the assumption except stereotype and racism. But the discussion is cut short when it's noticed that Jem doesn't have his pants. When it looks like they're busted, Dill tells Atticus that he won them from Jem, and when asked how, Dill spits out strip poker. So Scout doesn't even know what that is. But what's strange is that the adults seem to overlook the strip part and jump right into the gambling. Most would agree that gambling isn't a good activity for elementary school kids, especially in the 1930s. This was a common sentiment. Atticus is suspicious, so asks, well, did you use cards? Which would certainly be looked on as wrong, perhaps even a sin. So Jem covers and says they were using matches. So how they played poker with matches is unclear, but playing with fire is a lesser offense in the kids' eyes than playing with cards, and maybe it just served to distract the adults. So Atticus sends them off to work it out amongst themselves and forbids any further poker playing. Jem reassures Dill that it's going to blow over and it'll be fine, and then they send Dill off for school of the year. So this leaves the problem of Jem getting back his pants to take up the rest of the chapter. Since it's hot and it's summer, they're sleeping on the back screened-in porch. Jem waits until well into the night and tells Scout he's going to go get his pants because Atticus has never had to spank him and he doesn't want to get busted now. Scout pleads and threatens Jem to not go, saying she'll tell Atticus. But Jem, of course, threatens her and admits they shouldn't have done it at all. She ends up letting him out and laying there freaking out until he comes back safely. They don't talk any more that night as he comes in quietly and lays on his cot. So what should we take from this chapter? For one, we see the developing dishonesty of the children kind of come to a head. It blows up in their faces with the excursion into the Radley yard that night. We start to see a little self-reflection and potential maturity developing in Jem, not enough to admit it to Atticus. He sees, though, the damage his words and actions could have on his relationship with his father, and he actually admits to Scout he regrets what they did. So yes, they lied to get out of trouble, but we see Jem at least vocalizing being wrong, right? Dill and Scout, still being young, don't relate to his feelings, and Scout recognizes that she doesn't understand Jem's reasons for going to get his pants, and kind of sees this as a developing chasm between them. Questions or thoughts? Put them in the comment section. Hope that helps.